I'm Shaun.
And I am Phil.
And we are Freaks and Geeks. I was making DnB like for years and years and years, like probably from about the age of 12, but then I got distracted with the whole dubstep career for about 10 years. Probably around 2018, 2019, I just really rediscovered DnB and rekindled my love for it.
For me, it was more, I started DJing from the age of about 14, and living in Milton Keynes, there was the venue, the Sanctuary. They held loads of huge drum and bass events, so just lots of people were into drum and bass in Milton Keynes, and my older sister, all her friends were going to the raves, so they were all playing the tape packs and stuff. So I heard them playing the tape packs, heard like the early sort of 2000 DnB, and just became obsessed with it, and so started DJing. Musical inspirations for me, probably my dad was a jazz musician, so listened to a hell of a lot of jazz, and with that he was kind of into, you know, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, a lot of Motown stuff, so listened to a hell of a lot of that. And then when I was a little bit older, sort of, well, when I was like 6, 7, 8, Michael Jackson, that sort of stuff. And then I got into my teens, I listened to a hell of a lot of rock, Rage Against the Machine, punk bands like NoFX, etc. In drum and bass, I think some of my earliest inspirations were like Dillinger, probably, Caliber.
I started off listening to a lot of dance music early on, like house, garage, drum and bass, things like that. Then I went through a phase, which I think everyone did at the time, of listening to a lot of like metal bands and a lot of heavy rock type stuff. Then kind of found my way back to dance music when I got into my sort of mid-20s.
When starting a new track for me, really, I am just trying to find some sort of spark of inspiration. If it's something completely brand new, if I haven't got a vocal, I will just sit there and just, I don't know, maybe lay down some chords or something, or lay down a little lead riff, and yeah, I'm just waiting for something to catch my attention, something that just feels good and feels right, and then from that usually there's some sort of spark, and then I'll just continue from there.
Yeah, for me a lot of the time it starts with a vocal. You hear a vocal and it a lot of the time you can kind of tell what needs to happen with it, and I just end up going into a frenzy of production and just kind of creating a whole song around it.
I mean, I think DnB is an evolving genre, as all genres are, but I think what's great at the moment, and always has been the thing with DnB, it's just a big mishmash of like all different genres at a 174 BPM for me. At the moment, does it have a particular sound? I guess, you know, the jungly sound is coming back, but it's kind of, I actually really enjoy the fact that there is a kind of a crossbreed between the sort of more commercial poppy stuff and sort of the more, you know, the original sounds of jungle and stuff coming together. You know, sometimes people have a bit of a problem with that, but I think if it's done really well, it sounds really good. That's the beautiful thing about drum and bass, is it's always, for me, been an amalgamation of all genres kind of in another genre. Basically, you know, being at 174 is kind of what defines it, but it kind of can feel like jazz, it can feel like house, it can feel like pop music, it can feel like techno or trance. So yeah, it's just a big melting pot of everything, I think, and that's the beauty of it.
I mean, I think my least favourite part of the production process is getting tracks over the finish line.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of quite easy to get a track to like 90, 95%, but once you need to get a track to that 100% finish line, that can turn into a bit of a headache.
Yeah, it's definitely the difficult bit. Starting off a track and being inspired by something and getting that initial idea down is kind of the really enjoyable bit. But yeah, as Shaun said, finishing the track can be frustrating and difficult, and you've got to be very persistent to get it over the line.
Something I wish people or someone had told me very early on was to stop worrying so much about what everyone else is doing in music. Like, I think it's important to just do your own thing, whatever that may be, and stop worrying so much about how that fits into the sort of the wider world of music.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember that more often nowadays as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sort of overthinking and over worrying about what you're doing, essentially you've got to find your own thing. As I kind of said before, you've just got to find some sort of spark of creativity, and whenever you're working on something, whatever feels good for you, when it feels good, just roll with it, and hopefully you'll find your own originality, your own sound with that.
My favourite track that we've made, I always come back to Waiting For You. It just, something about that track I just find immensely satisfying to listen to. And it came together so easily as well. It was one of those ones that it just fell out of us.
Yeah, it was super quick. Yeah, I do love Waiting For You, but I think it's probably Free Falling for me. I guess it was a similar thing. It probably took a little bit longer to get that one over the line, but the initial idea came together very quickly. And I think we found that vocal sample, and that just really inspired us to write the track. So yeah, probably Free Falling for me.
I would say our biggest secret weapon right now is probably Shaper Box. It just really lets you dial in the sidechain in a way that I don't think any other plugin quite does. I think the main way that I'm able to finish tracks is I do a lot of referencing. I'll listen to 20 tracks that I really like that sort of fit the same feeling as the one I'm working on.
Yeah, if you're struggling to finish a track and you listen to someone else's, you can kind of, if you're working on one particular section, you might find a way of sort of transitioning onto another section by listening to someone else's track and maybe hearing where they've gone next with their track. Yeah, referencing is very useful for developing a track as well. You might have a loop that's a really strong idea, but you're like, where do I go next? And listening to a few other tracks and kind of figuring out where they go after their sort of main 16-bar drop might inspire you to sort of find your own path. So something that all new producers should learn, I would say persistence. I've been producing for 20-25 years, and when you first start you think that everything's going to come to you maybe overnight, but the reality is it takes a long time to sort of master your craft, and I would say especially production and especially drum and bass. So if you're starting out, I would say just don't give up. The more hard work, the more time you put in front of your door producing music, the better you will get. And so just don't give up, and yeah, put in the hours. That's the best advice I could give.
For me, I don't think there ever really was a major turning point. I think everything in your career is kind of this snowball effect. Everything you do just kind of sort of builds piece by piece this career that you can't just hand someone a career overnight. I mean, I used to think, oh, well, one day I'll get signed and then I'll be big. But in reality, it's just an ongoing process. You're always trying to improve, and you're always building on everything you've already done.
Yeah, that's it. Essentially, there is no turning point. You've got to kind of be prepared for things to go up and down, and things going here, there, and everywhere. And again, you've just got to be persistent and just don't let anything stop you, really. Work hard and you'll get there.
Or not.
Or not.
For me, the thing I always struggled with more than anything else was working with vocals. It just doesn't come naturally to me, really. I always just made instrumental music right from the very beginning. But I love listening to vocals. I like vocal tracks, so I always wanted to incorporate vocals into my music, but it just really didn't come naturally to me.
I think I've always been the opposite to Shaun. Like, vocals has always been my thing, and he's always been good at something that maybe I wasn't. But when I first started out, I always worked on a very small part of the track, like a 16-bar or 32-bar loop. I get a bit stuck with moving on from the track, like developing the rest of the track. So I would say, like, if you do get a really solid 16 bars or a drop, for instance, just start working on the intro straight away. Start thinking about what's coming next. Always be thinking about what's the intro going to sound like, what's the next part of the track's going to sound like, what's the breakdown going to sound like, because it's going to kind of sculpt what maybe the drop would sound like. So yeah, think about the rest of the track and not just a very small part of it. There is a thing called Splice, which everyone uses, I think, nowadays. And so essentially, yeah, it's a sound and sample library, online sample library, and that was an absolute game changer for us, I would say, wouldn't you say, Shaun?
Yeah, for me, I think it's just the whole, like, internet has really opened things up. When I started, you would be lucky if you had a sample CD. There was no tutorials. There's no way to find any information or samples or anything, really. So things like Splice and YouTube have made a massive difference in how easy it is to get started, I think. When I started out, I was just starting from absolutely nothing with no idea where to go. But nowadays, young producers, you know, they've kind of got all the tools at their fingertips right from day one.
Well, there is two of us So I'd say that really helps. For example, Shaun was on tour in Australia, New Zealand just a few weeks back, and it means I can be back here in the studio working on stuff. Shaun can work on stuff while he's away on his laptop, but yeah, it does help if there's two of you, because when one's on tour, the other can sort of crack on, I guess.
It does take time to get used to that though. When I first started touring, I found it really difficult to finish music because I wasn't working on music while I was away. But nowadays, it's kind of part of my normal routine to just crack on with music on planes, in hotel rooms, just wherever I can really. So it's something that I had to learn to get used to, but it is part of my normal life now.
Really varies, yeah, from one track to another, basically.
Yeah, I mean, some tracks we've done have taken us a couple of years. You know, it's not like we're working on it every day, but sometimes things, you know, you have to just let them rest and then come back to them another time. But other tracks, we'll knock them out in a couple of weeks. It really depends what the track is and what we're trying to achieve with it. Sometimes it's worth taking your time to make sure you've definitely got it right.
Yeah, one thing some people are scared to do is have a lot of projects going at the same time, but something that we do find is that, you know, like, you might be trying to work a vocal that's not quite working in one track, so that kind of puts that on the back burner and you can't work on it a few weeks while the vocalist works on that. So it's good to have something else that you can then bring to the forefront and work on. So don't be scared to like have maybe, you know, I think probably at the moment we might have 20 tracks on the go, which seems crazy, but it just means that at least 2 or 3 tracks can take priority at a time while the others are kind of sort of simmering in the background, if you like. So yeah, that's something that we tend to do, and that kind of helps us. Then we've always got something that we can finish up and, you know, keep a consistent release schedule.
I think nowadays we end up releasing a lot more of the music that we make. When we first started, we were kind of trying to wrap our heads around what Freaks and Geeks is and what direction it's going to take. So we made a lot of ideas at that point that didn't come out.
Yeah, but I think nowadays maybe, I don't know, Shaun thought maybe about 40% of what we make sees the light of day, but I think maybe it's more 20%. It's hard to tell, because another thing we've discussed is that when you do have ideas that don't get used, what we often do is when we're writing on something current that we're about to finish, we might think, oh, what about those drums in an old tune or an older idea that we had? We might go and like regurgitate those drums and bring them into a new project, or we might have a bass sound, for instance, that we remember, and that works really well. So stuff does get, like, even though you might not actually release it, you don't tend to waste ideas that you've written. You kind of like revamp them and bring them into new projects, if you like. So then it probably does balance out. About 30-40% of what we make gets released.
Well, we use kick 2 in literally every song we ever do. I think it's probably been the kick drum in every Freaks and Geeks song.
And we aren't just saying that. The question actually made a joke about the fact of what is your favourite plugin, and apart from kick 2. But yeah, as Shaun said, kick 2 we literally use in every single track that we've released.
Apart from kick 2 though, Serum is obviously the absolute go-to. You can't get away from Serum at all. Use it for absolutely everything, sounds and effects and leads and basses. It's just
so versatile.
These days we find more and more that we just use basically no outboard gear. We don't really have that much stuff. I sold a lot of my outboard gear a few years ago because I found I just wasn't using it. The plug-in quality these days is so high that you really don't need to worry too much about outboard gear.
No, it's unreal. Like the stuff, the emulators you can get now for sort of hardware is, yeah, it's kind of, you almost can't tell it's not hardware. So yeah, we really haven't got much at all. Got a few synthesizers that we very occasionally use, like a Moog, and we've got a Poly D over there. And what else we got? A Mini Brute. But yeah, most of the stuff now is in the box.
We both have Adam monitors. We've both got slightly different models, but yeah, we find that the Adams are they're just a pleasure to use. I find that I don't get fatigue when I'm using them. My older monitors, my ears would hurt after a couple of hours, but I don't get that with the Adams.
Yeah, and we combine that with a piece of software, like room analysis, to get like a room EQ sound ID reference. Go and check that out if you've never heard of it. That is really good to kind of adapt your monitors to your listening environment. That combined with a pair of Adams, I find I get no fatigue whatsoever. And in terms of headphones, I don't really mind what headphones I work on, as long as it's nothing too trebly, because at the end of the day, when I'm working on headphones, it's just I'm just thinking about what I'm, just content and what I'm creating, not the actual, not sonically what it sounds like. You can do that when you get back in front of your monitors. So headphones to me doesn't matter so much. A pair of Bose I use, they're pretty good. But yeah, Adams all the way for monitors for us.
Living out loud, I'm a baseline carrier. Living out loud, I'm a baseline carrier. Drum and bass double up.